I want to tell you, this is Macon, Georgia, at Cherry Blossom Festival time, and this is a city that has an opinion. Today, I have a question for you. I want you to just look at me right now, right through your television set, and say, answer me, do you think that we all ought to be tested for AIDS? What's your opinion? Well, all across the country, there are bills that are being proposed and passed that would require people to be tested for AIDS. Our guests, number one, from the state of Georgia, this is Representative J.E. Billy McKinney. Mr. McKinney has authored a bill in Georgia that would require an AIDS test for any person getting a blood test for any reason at all. And by the way, that bill has passed in the Georgia State House of Representatives. Since we're in Georgia, it was important for you to know that. This is Reverend Ken South. The Reverend says that if this bill does pass in the state of Georgia, it would be the most backward law in the state. Obviously, Reverend South is against mandatory testing. And this is a biologist. His name is Anthony Robertson. He is so much in favor of mandatory testing that he says it has to become a part of our life. Next, Dr. Harold Katner. Dr. Katner believes that if mandatory testing is made into a law, it would only serve to drive the homosexual men and women back into a heterosexual lifestyle that would be very dangerous to the health of our country. Let's start with you, Congressperson McKinney. Do you feel that AIDS is a homosexual disease, sir?
I don't know if it's a homosexual disease. I know that it is a catastrophe. It's a worldwide disease. The statistics tell me that it is probably a homosexual disease if 90% of the victims are homosexual. If 5 or 6 or 7% of the victims are drug abusers who put dirty needles in their arms, and the rest of the population is only hemophiliacs or innocent people who must have drug products, who must have transfusions, then I would say that there's primarily a homosexual disease.
Doctor?
This disease in Central Africa and in other countries of the world is clearly a disease that's spread by a virus. It's not spread by it doesn't belong to a particular lifestyle, a particular group. In Africa, it's 50-50 men and women. It's clearly a heterosexual disease, if you want to make it that. It's not a heterosexual disease, it's not a homosexual disease. It's a disease caused by a virus called HIV. Any person that behaves in certain behaviors sexually or shares needles and gets infected blood or infected semen from point A to point B, whether they're heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, ambisexual, pansexual, whatever, are going to get this virus, they're going to get sick, and they're going to die. That's the issue. The issue has to do with behavior and not with groups.
When I was in school, I worked as a food handler, and before I could, I had to have a health card, and I had to have a blood test for tuberculosis. I didn't feel this was an infringement upon my rights. I felt I protected the innocent, and I feel the same way.
Let me say,
That's an excellent point.
let me say this. That's an excellent point that supports my position. I get a physical once a year. The nurse pulls 3 vials of blood out of my body. They test that blood for 36 different illnesses. Why not add one more? AIDS.
I'll give you the answer. This woman gives a good example, and that's the example that's used all the time. The point is tuberculosis is spread in a very different way than AIDS is spread. And the fact is that the person that gets, the food handler that gets tested on Monday and is negative can be positive Monday night. You cannot test this is a sexually transmitted disease. It's transmitted in a split second. You can't have people tested every single day of the year.
But Reverend South, every time we get married in this country, we have a Wasserman test for syphilis.
That's right. That's right. And there are 22, that's the best example. That's a good example. There are 22 sexually transmitted diseases and we test for one. What good does that do?
I don't know. Why are we doing it? Why are we testing anyhow, sir?
Because that's a good question.
What about false positives? What about the people who are innocent, who are going to test positive for this disease? And this is happening.
I want to know how many people in Middle Georgia have AIDS.
How many? We estimate at this point in time there's 3,000 to 6,000 infected people in Middle Georgia.
I'm going to go
One out of every 100 individual in this audience is potentially infected. We're talking about 2 million people in this country that may have this infection. That's 1 for 200 adults.
The important question is not whether we're going to make AIDS testing mandatory, but what it's going to do to our lifestyles and our society. And what I see frightens me to death.
Why?
We're becoming so paranoid and so afraid that my God, she might have AIDS. Do you have AIDS? And that's what we're turning into. And these people need our help. And they need to know that they can come to us.
I agree. I want to help them. I want to help them. I really want to help them. I want to help them because I want everybody. I want it like this other lady said. If you take a test, you're taking tests all the time. The American Red Cross has made serious errors in not testing the blood that they have given. We've got a legislator right now who has hepatitis week before last because he got some bad blood. It's just been said that thousands of people have been infected because of bad blood. All they wanted was a blood transfusion.
Let me ask, though, once you have identified who has it, once we know, if you do have testing, who has it, what do we do with these people? Send them west to the Mississippi? Send them here to Macon, Georgia?
That's a very good question.
What do we do with them? We'll take a break and we'll answer that when we return. I'll let you talk, Reverend. We are talking about testing for AIDS, and we posed the question that after you do test and you quarantine certain people, what do you do with them? I mean, where do you send them? This is Kurt, and Kurt has AIDS. What would you like to have happen to Kurt? Sir, McKinney.
You asking me?
Yes, Representative.
I would like for Kurt not to have any more sex with anybody. That's one thing. I think that the Public Health Agency, Department of Public Health, should know that Kurt has AIDS. Now,
They do know.
They do know.
That's the report of last year.
Soldiers get tested now. When they get AIDS, they are put out of the Army. They come back to this community, and there's no mechanism for that information coming back with that person back into this community because Georgia Public Health will not accept that information. Pass my bill, and that information would come back with that soldier.
First of all, what you're talking about, mandatory testing is not going to solve anything. I have devoted my life to educating people on behavior changes. And what you're saying is just going to cost a lot of money, and it makes me mad. It makes me really...
Why are you mad, Kurt?
Because that money needs to be spent on educating people for behavior changes, and it needs to be spent on
Behavioral
research.
change is right. That money, it costs $35 to test, and it costs $150,000 to treat that man.
That's a great example of people who think in simplistic ways that a $35 test somehow is A, going to stop the spread, B, is going to stop the person from getting AIDS, and C, is going to stop this epidemic. It isn't going to do that. There's an assumption that AIDS testing is prevention. And let me say also that we're not testing for AIDS, and people don't have it when they're positive for an antibody test. This is not an AIDS test. The media has used that phrase, and we end up using it too. So, and mandatory testing, one more thing I want to say about it, is that mandatory testing, voluntary testing is helpful. Voluntary anonymous test sites that we have in this state have been saving thousands of lives, and this bill will eliminate them in 24 hours.
It will not.
You are...
It's going to
I'm
require
confused.
Kurt will eventually cost the state of Georgia $150,000. Oh, yes, he will.
No, I don't think so. Because look at him. This man has stood up here. He has lived the way that Georgia says live, and we have paid our taxes, and we've done what we're supposed to do. This man has got AIDS. There's nothing that no one out here can do except try to fight this disease. And who are you to stand up there and say that we, the taxpayer, have to go and pay for these people for the tests and everything else? Yeah, I've had my HCLV3 run, but there's one thing about it. If I had it, there's nobody going to help me with it. And the gay community sticks together, and we will organize, and we will fight this disease.
And the gay community, that is the gay community. This country has gone to pot if it's gay. This country has gone to pot if it's gay.
I'd like to keep one more policy
let me ask you talk
There's a
one at a time.
there's a very important public policy issue here that people don't understand, and I think this is one you need to understand. Mandatory testing, in his bill, mandatory testing of pregnant women means mandatory testing of black and Hispanic women. 85% of all cases of AIDS of babies in America are black and Hispanic women. When you make it mandatory testing, that means you have mandatory abortion. Abortion is recommended by doctors for women who are positive. A woman who is positive the rest of her life. A 15-year-old black girl is positive the rest of her life. When the state starts taking responsibility for her life, telling her she has to get tested, then giving the results, then taking responsibility for paying for her abortion, how does the state make sure she have no more babies is mandatory sterilization. That's a serious issue. It's a public health issue.
If you have ever seen a little baby laying in Grady Hospital, a little AIDS-born baby laying in Grady Hospital, it's one of the most pitiful sights you'll ever see.
And every
no woman with AIDS should have a baby.
We only need
One
to
moment.
test if we want to stop spreading the disease.
I believe in mandatory testing because there is freedom. My freedom begins when someone else's ends, and it seems that my freedom is being infringed upon.
Our freedom is infringed upon only if we're having sex with dozens of people. If we limit our sexual contacts to that one individual, there's no way we're going to get this disease.
That's all very well and good to say, but I wonder how many people listen to you who even know how important it is.
That's why West of this is such a
Georgia
question.
is fifth in the nation for syphilis and gonorrhea, and we're third for unwanted pregnancies. With all the Christians we have in our state, now I'm one, there's a lot of sex going on in Georgia, and it's not just gay people.
Don't you think that all daycare workers should be tested? I would not want my child to go to a daycare center if someone has AIDS. They cannot go to a daycare center if they have TB.
There has not been any transmission of households where babies have had AIDS, where mothers have taken care of babies, birthed babies, cleaned babies, changed diapers.
You cannot ignore
Wait, let's ask our botanist. What is it, sir?
There have been several cases where people have been doing invasive procedures.
No, there haven't. There have been cases published in the Lancet of transmission within the household.
Ricky, over there.
No invasive procedures. There have been cases where one brother infected another. There was no invasive procedure. We cannot ignore these cases.
I feel that we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Amen.
What would it harm if everybody were tested? We would at least know what we are dealing with.
That's right.
If everybody,
The only reason for testing is if we want to stop the spread of this virus. If we don't want to stop it, we need testing.
what are we going to do to stop?
We have to know, the only way to stop a lethal infectious disease is to know who is infected.
Then what?
If we don't know
Then what?
Then we
After you
can-
know, then what?
then we can avoid getting infected by them.
Let me
They can
ask
avoid
you a question,
infecting
though.
others.
Are we not using this testing idea to discriminate against
No, of course not.
blacks,
That's what they
Hispanics,
say.
and
That's
people who
what
are
they
gay?
say. Nobody
Are they
is
right?
fighting.
I'm just asking you.
Nobody is fighting.
We must
Nobody
remember-
is fighting but the gay community.
We must remember that
Why would
90%
they
of
be
those
fighting?
carrying
I
the
don't
virus do
understand
not know it.
This is not
Sorry,
fair.
wait, one at a time,
We
sir.
must remember that 90%, maybe 2 million people carrying the virus do not know it. How can they stop spreading it if they do not know it?
We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Question.
I am for mandatory testing yearly. I do not believe that we have to wait for a case to be reported in a nursery school or anywhere else before we do anything about it. Let's do it now, and not just gay communities, heterosexual, everybody. I mean, I'm not picking out any one group.
So the average American family of four can tack on $140 extra onto their income tax, thanks to our fine representative up there.
The National Public Radio just recently reported that the largest homosexuals transmit AIDS. That is the main way to get it, and that homosexuals do not use condoms when doing these activities. I say that if anyone knowingly has this disease, and by knowing I mean with the test, the mandatory test, which I am for, that they be prosecuted and put in jail for that.
I am for mandatory checking because this is the only method that we are going to be able to employ at this particular time to control it. Whatever necessary steps that must be taken after we identify that individual, we must take those steps. But this will be the only method that we can use at this particular time to control it. We need to look at it and then do so.
Question. I
I'm with the American Red Cross. I'm a volunteer. I work for the Bloodmobile constantly. I think we should have it because people are so afraid of giving blood. We need the blood here in Georgia so badly, and there is nothing to be afraid of.
I'm really concerned about the discrimination, primarily due to the lack of education. There are a lot of opinions here, but we all need to know the facts.
Ricky?
What is the main reason that people don't want to be tested?
A lot of reasons. For one, if everybody here in the room is tested, by the way, your doctor gets a report from the insurance company, and it's going to be on your insurance form that you have been tested. Just being tested puts you in a high-risk category. You can say it's true.
No.
Ask your doctor. Ask your doctor of the forms that he or she is getting from the insurance companies. Ask him. Don't believe me.
Over
Ask
here.
Your doctor.
I'd like to come in about being black and being pregnant. I'm black and I'm pregnant. If I have any chance of my unborn child having AIDS, I'd like to know, and I'd like not to have that child to have all the pain and suffering there is to have.
Over here.
A famous man in history once had a very good point on what to do with people who are threats to you. Put them in concentration camps with big yellow stars on their shirts. I'm not in favor of mandatory drug testing. It's a violation of privacy.
Ricky?
I'm extremely sympathetic to the people that have AIDS that were innocent people, but my sympathy is not going to get in the way of me protecting my children from other people that have it, that are around them in school or anything. I want the people that have AIDS away from them.
Doctor?
I'd like to make one comment. There are a number of people who have false positive blood tests. They do not have AIDS, but their blood tests will test positive. And those are mostly females who have had a number of children or certain genetic types of females. Those people will be thrown into this group. And that's because this is not a perfect test. And I think we all need to remember that, because many of you may have that problem.
The test is very good now, and we do know about the problem with women, so we can understand that and retest. That's not an issue. This is a very important test. The false positive rate is about 1 in 1,000 now.
Since sex is the main way this disease is spread, I think it would be great with so much casual sex in America today to be able to say, let me see your driver's license. Let me make sure you've had your AIDS test.
That's exactly the problem. Doing that seems like a neat idea, and doing that is going to spread this virus faster for this reason. You were only as negative on that day of the test. If you get a test on April 1st, you can be positive on April 2nd. So if you have that negative card, you go out with somebody, show them your negative card, boom, you get infected. What good is it? You're only as good as the day you get tested.
That's not true unless you've had sex that night.
That's right. You can have sex every night of the week.
Well, not all of us are having indiscriminate sex all the time. Ricky?
I resent this being compared with TB, which is a treatable disease. AIDS is not treatable. The understanding that I have is we are 5 to 10 years away from any vaccine, possible vaccine, that can stop this pandemic thing that's coming on.
What about our biologist? How far are we away from an answer so that we don't have to have discussions like this?
There's no prospect at the moment of a cure or a vaccine.
None?
None.
What about a foreseeable future?
We have to work. We can never say no, but we have no idea at the moment of how to do it.
None?
None.
We know how to prevent this disease right now.
The only way to prevent it...
One more person needs to get this disease, and we can all do it.
Tell us how.
It's called prevention. It's called safe sex. It's called...
We know that safe sex doesn't work. We know it does experiments already.
Wait, gentlemen, let me ask you a question. What is...
Safe sex is having sex with another human being and the non-exchange of semen from point A to point B. For most people, it's the use of a condom. If every sexually active American used that tomorrow, we would stop this disease.
And that would be no more babies born.
That's right. And we'd eliminate the baby epidemic.
Then the country is dead.
Wait a minute. I can't hear
My God tells me that man and woman is supposed to have sex for procreation, for babies.
We know
if
that
everybody in this country use condoms from here on out, then this country will die 2 generations from now.
We know that married couples who use condoms still get infected from each other with the AIDS virus. That is known now, so they do not work.
They work in 95% of the cases.
No,
That's better than nothing.
They don't.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back. I think this is a tremendously important conversation. I would like to thank our guests. I am real bad at goodbyes, especially when I have had as phenomenal a time as we have had here this week in Macon. I would like to thank Don McGurk and the entire staff and crew of WMAZ, our family here. I would also like to thank my own staff, the Cherry Blossom people for bringing us down, and the fabulous people of Macon, Georgia. I love you. Bye.
Some members of our audience will receive an